The Adamantine of the United Earth Forces was not a beautiful ship. It was ugly, as everything designed for hard work tends to be. Its hull was a patchwork quilt of plates from a dozen different shipyards. The paint had faded from years of radiation exposure, and its engines emitted a sound the chief engineer called character and everyone else called alarming. But it was reliable. It had ferried cargo and crew across 17 star systems without losing a single soul. Captain Elena Vaskis loved this ship the way a farmer loves an old tractor. It wasn't pretty, but it worked even on the day everything changed. The Adamantine was 3 days out from Colony 7, escorting a convoy of transport ships through the Rim. The Rim was technically neutral space, but everyone knew the Dominion of the Bretts considered it their territory, just as the Bretts considered most of the galaxy their territory. They were an ancient race, thousands of years older than humanity. They were building empires while humans were still mastering fire, and they never let anyone forget it. Captain Vaskis stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main viewport. She was a tall woman with short-cropped gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had served in the fleet for 30 years. She had survived 3 wars and 2 tribunals. The tribunals were not her fault. The wars, mostly, weren't either. "Captain," Lieutenant Park said from the sensor station. His voice was calm, but Vaskis had served with him long enough to hear the trepidation lurking beneath it. "I'm detecting something strange. Multiple contacts at heading 47. "How many?" Vaskis asked. Park paused. His fingers danced across the console. 12? No, 15. They're emerging from the asteroid field. Vaskis felt her stomach tighten. 15 ships hiding in an asteroid field meant one thing: an ambush. Identification. Working on it. Park's face went pale. Bretts, those are Brett warships. 1 cruiser, 6 destroyers, 8 auxiliary vessels. Silence descended on the bridge. Everyone knew what that meant. 1 Brett destroyer could take on 3 human cruisers, and a cruiser was far, far worse. "Comms," Vaskis said, keeping her voice level. "Signal the convoy. Tell them to scatter and retreat. Maximum speed. Do not wait for us, Captain." The communications officer, a young woman named Torres, looked at her with wide eyes. "We can't fight them alone." "We aren't going to fight them," Vaskis said. "We are going to slow them down. Send the message." Torres nodded and turned to her console. Her hands were shaking. Vaskis opened the ship-wide channel. "All stations, this is the captain. General quarters. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The Adamantine sprang to life. Crew members scrambled to their posts. Weapon systems activated. The old ship shuddered as its engines were pushed to the limit. Vaskis knew it wouldn't be enough. The Brett ships were faster, stronger, and better in every way that mattered. But she was not going to let her convoy perish without a fight. "They're hailing us," Torres said. "Put them through." The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was a Brett commander. His gray skin was marked with the ritual scars of high rank. His eyes were black and empty, like holes in space. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stones. "Human ship, you have entered Dominion space. Your presence here is an insult. Your existence is an insult. Surrender your vessel and prepare for boarding." Vaskis stood tall. "This is Captain Elena Vaskis of the United Earth ship Adamantine. We are in neutral space, escorting civilian vessels. We have no quarrel with the Dominion. Let us pass." The Brett commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Neutral space. There is no neutral space. There is only space that the Dominion has not yet conquered. Your species spreads through the galaxy like a disease. You build your little colonies, you breed like insects. You think you matter." He leaned closer to the screen. "You are pathetic. You do not matter. You are pests. And today, pests learn their place." The screen went dark. "They're charging weapons," Park said. "Evasive maneuvers," Vaskis ordered. "Return fire when ready." The Adamantine banked sharply to the left. Its old hull groaned in protest. The first Brett shots missed by meters. The second volley struck the rear shields. The ship shook like a toy in the hands of a giant. Sirens blaring. "Shields at 60%, Park reported. "They're too fast. We can't dodge them all." "Keep trying," Vaskis said. "Fire missiles and plasma at the lead destroyer." The Adamantine's cannons spoke. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through space. Those that hit barely scratched the Brett shields. It was like throwing stones at a mountain. Another volley hit them. The lights flickered. Somewhere on the ship, something exploded. "Shields at 30%. Hull breach on deck 7. Emergency bulkheads are holding." Vaskis gripped the armrests of her chair. They were dying. Slowly, but surely, they were dying. She knew it would end this way. She just hoped to buy more time. And then, something changed. The Brett ships stopped firing. They stopped moving. They just hung in space, surrounding the Adamantine like wolves around a wounded deer. "What are they doing?" Torres asked. "I don't know," Park said. He looked at his console with confusion. "They've disabled weapons, but they're charging something else. Some kind of device on the flagship? I've never seen readings like this." Vaskis felt a chill run down her spine. "Get us out of here. Maximum speed. Now!" But it was too late. A beam of pale blue light shot from the Brett flagship. It didn't hit the Adamantine. It passed right through it, as if it weren't there at all. And in its place, everything stopped. The lights went out. The engines fell silent. The consoles went dark. Artificial gravity failed, and Vaskis found herself drifting out of her chair. Emergency lights flickered, bathing everything in a dim red glow. "Report," Vaskis said. Her voice sounded strange in the sudden silence. There was no hum of machinery, no whisper of air circulation, nothing. I don't know," Park said. He was digging at his console, pressing buttons that did nothing. "Everything is dead. Main power, reserve power, batteries. It's as if they just turned us off." "Life support?" Vaskis asked. "Dead. And we have only as much air as is currently in the ship. Maybe 12 hours if we're careful. Maybe less. Weapons are dead. Engines are dead. Communications?" Park just shook his head. Vaskis drifted in the dark, surrounded by her helpless crew. The Adamantine was dead, not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, just dead. Every system, every circuit, every piece of technology had been turned off like a light switch. The Bretts had done the impossible. They had killed their ship without firing a single shot. And then, the communications screen flickered. Only this one screen? Powered by what? The Bretts sent a signal. The face of the commander appeared again, and this time, he was smiling. It was an unpleasant smile. "Now you understand, pests. This is a cascade disruptor, a weapon your primitive minds cannot comprehend. It does not destroy, it does not damage, it simply ceases existence. All systems on your ship have become dead matter. Your weapons, your engines, your life support. Everything is gone." Vaskis found her voice. "Why? If you wanted to kill us, you could have just destroyed us." The Brett commander's smile widened. "Because destruction is too fast, too merciful. Your species must learn what it means to defy the Dominion. Therefore, we will leave you to drift. We will let you watch your air run out. We will let you freeze as your heat bleeds into the void. And when you are all dead, we will return. We will collect your bodies and display them in the Hall of Conquered Pests, where the entire galaxy will see what happens to those who forget their place." He leaned back, satisfied. "We will return in 3 solar cycles. By then, you will be well preserved. Frozen meat in a metal box. A monument to human arrogance." The screen went black. Vaskis drifted in silence. Her mind worked feverishly. 3 days. They had 3 days before the Bretts returned. 3 days without power, without heat, without air circulation. 3 days to freeze to death in the dark. Around her, she could hear the breathing of her people. 340 people trapped in a metal coffin, waiting for death. Some were crying, some were praying, some just stared into nothing, already accepting their fate. But Vaskis was not ready to accept anything. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence, everyone heard her. "We aren't dead yet. We are still breathing. We are still thinking. And as long as that is true, we have a chance." "How?" asked someone. It was Chen, the chief engineer. He floated over from the engine room. His face was covered in grime and shock. "Everything is dead, Captain. I've never seen anything like it. It's not just that the power is off. The circuits themselves were altered, scrambled on a molecular level. I can't fix it. No one can fix it." "Then we will find another way," Vaskis said. "We have 340 of the most stubborn, creative, fierce people in this sector. We have 3 days, and we have one thing the Bretts don't expect." "What's that?" Chen asked. Vaskis looked at him and, despite everything, smiled. "We have absolutely nothing to lose." She pushed off the console and floated toward the door. "All senior officers, meet me in the cargo bay. We will go through every piece of equipment on this ship, every crate, every container, every forgotten box in every corner. If there is anything on this ship that still works, we will find it, and then we will decide how to use it. For what? Torres asked. Vaskis stopped at the door. She looked back at her bridge crew, at their frightened faces illuminated by the dim red emergency light. Outside the viewport, she saw the Brett fleet holding position, patient as death. They thought they had won. They thought the humans would just drift here and die like good little pests. They were wrong. For revenge, Vaskis said. Or for survival. Or for both at once. Right now, I'll take either. She pushed through the door and floated into the dark corridor behind it. Behind her, one by one, her people followed. They were scared, they were cold, they were facing impossible odds, but they were human. And humans had been facing impossible odds since they first climbed down from the trees and looked at the stars. It was essentially their specialty. The Bretts had made a mistake. They didn't just lock the crew of the Adamantine away, they backed them into a corner. They took away every option except the most desperate one. And desperate people, as the galaxy was about to learn, were very dangerous. In the cold gloom of the dead ship, Captain Elena Vaskis began to plan. The first hour was the hardest. Without gravity, everything floated. Without light, everything was a shadow. And without air circulation, the ship began to smell of fear, sweat, and the chemical scent of system leaks. The crew moved through the corridors, clinging to handrails and pushing off, orienting themselves by chemical glow sticks that cast a sickly green light. Vaskis organized search parties. Every deck, every room, every storage bay needed to be checked. They were looking for anything that might still work. Mechanical tools, chemical batteries, anything that didn't rely on the ship's electrical grid. The results were not encouraging. The Cascade disruptor had worked thoroughly. Even flashlights were dead. Even portable communicators, even simple heating elements in emergency suits, the Bretts had made sure of that. It affected everything electronic, everything electrical, everything that used current, charge, or energy of any kind. But a few things still worked. Chemical glow sticks, which were just tubes with reactive compounds, mechanical clocks, the kind wound by springs, hand tools without electrical components, and, most importantly, emergency oxygen canisters, which were purely mechanical pressure vessels. It's not much, Chen said, floating next to Vaskis in the main cargo bay. They had gathered everything useful in one place. It was a small pile. We have about 500 glow sticks, enough for a week if we're careful. The oxygen canisters will give us air, maybe for 2 days. After that, he shrugged. What about the cargo? Vaskis asked. We picked up something on Sigma 9. Secret. No one told me what it was. Chen's face changed. I forgot about that. It's in Cargo Bay 7. A sealed container with big warning signs. I was told not to ask questions. Then let's go ask questions. They made their way through the ship. The temperature was already dropping. Without heating systems, the cold of space seeped through the hull. Vaskis could see her breath in the light of the glow sticks. Some of the crew had wrapped themselves in blankets from the sleeping quarters. Others huddled together for warmth. The cargo bay was located in the lower part of the ship, near the outer skin. The door was sealed, but without power, the locks didn't work. Chen used a manual override to force it open. The bay was dark and cold, filled with standard transport containers, but in the center, separate from everything else, stood a container of a different type. It was black and shapeless, with no markings except yellow warning stripes and one word stenciled in white letters: Prometheus. What do you think it is? Chen asked. Only one way to find out. Vaskis pulled herself toward the container. The seal was electronic, but who added a mechanical backup? A simple combination lock. She took out her personal toolkit and got to work. After 20 minutes, the lock clicked. Inside the container, secured by mechanical clamps, lay a device unlike anything she had ever seen. It was the size of a ground vehicle, covered in cables, cooling fins, and warning labels. In the center was a sphere of some crystalline material that seemed to glow with its own faint light. Chen, Vaskis said slowly, please tell me you know what this is. Chen floated closer. His face went pale in the green light. I've heard rumors. Theoretical stuff. The territory of crazy scientists. He reached out and cautiously touched the device, as if it might bite him. If this is what I think it is, it shouldn't exist. They said it was impossible. What is it? Chen looked at her, and in his eyes was something that might have been fear or wonder. It's a gravity lens, a device that can warp space itself. Theoretically, it can be used to create artificial gravity wells or to compress matter or to... He stopped. Or for what? Or for destruction. Not just of ships, of everything. The simulation showed that such a device, if it works, could compress matter so much that it creates a temporary singularity, a black hole that exists for a fraction of a second and then evaporates. He swallowed. Tests were canceled. They said it was too unstable, too dangerous. It didn't just destroy the target. It destroyed everything nearby, including the ship that fired it. Vaskis stared at the device. It lay in its container, innocent and terrifying. A weapon that shouldn't exist. A weapon that was deemed too horrific to use. A weapon that was being transported for destruction. And now, it was the only thing that might still work on the ship. "Chen," Vaskis said, "can you make it fire?" "Captain, you don't understand. Even if we can make it work, it will kill us too. The blast radius in the simulations was huge. We would be right in the center. The Bretts are going to kill us anyway. At least this way, we take them with us." Chen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at the device again. He looked at the dark, cold cargo bay around them. He thought about how his crew was slowly freezing to death, waiting for the Bretts to return and collect their bodies. "I'll need help," he said. "Dr. Tanaka from the science team. She worked on theoretical physics before joining the fleet, and I'll need time and tools and probably a miracle." Vaskis placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have 3 days. I'll get you the rest." She turned and moved to the door. Behind her, Chen was already studying the device, muttering to himself. His engineering brain was starting to work on the problem. It was madness. It was impossible. It would probably kill them all. But it was a chance. And right now, a chance was better than what they had 5 minutes ago. The Bretts thought they were watching pests die slowly in a trap. They were wrong. They were watching humans do what humans do best. They were watching them refuse to surrender. And in the cold gloom of a dead ship, surrounded by enemies, with dwindling air and time and hope, that refusal was the most dangerous weapon of all. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had spent 15 years studying things that shouldn't exist. She wrote papers on theoretical physics that made other scientists uncomfortable. She proposed ideas that her colleagues called interesting in the same sense that people call dangerous animals interesting. And now she was floating in a frozen cargo bay, staring at something that confirmed all her wildest theories. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Chen floated next to her, shivering from the cold. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since they found the device. "It's a bomb. A very complex bomb. It's not a bomb. It's a lens. A way to warp space itself." Tanaka moved closer. Her breath formed clouds in the light of the green glow stick. "See this crystal in the center? It's not glass, it's not mineral, it's compressed space, time, frozen geometry. Someone figured out how to take the fabric of reality and turn it into a solid object. Can you make it work?" Tanaka paused for a long time. She reached out and touched the crystal. It was warm, despite the freezing air around them warm, like a living creature. "The device is intact," she said finally. "The cascade disruptor didn't touch it because it doesn't use standard power. It uses something else. Something the Bretts probably don't even know about." She turned to Chen. "But there is a problem. Of course there is. The device was designed to be powered by a starship reactor. We don't have one. We don't have power at all. To activate the lens, we need a massive amount of energy delivered in a single pulse. Without that, the crystal is just an expensive paperweight." Chen's face fell. "Then it's useless." "I didn't say that." Tanaka pushed off and floated toward the workbench that had been set up in the cargo bay. Someone had gathered mechanical tools there that still worked. Wrenches and screwdrivers and hammers, primitive tools for a primitive solution. Maybe there is another way. The crystal doesn't need energy to maintain its structure. It only needs energy for activation, like a spark to light a fire. Where do we find a spark? Everything electronic is dead. Not everything. Tanaka smiled. It was the smile of a person who had just seen the answer to a very difficult puzzle. The emergency beacon. It has a capacitor, a large one, designed to send distress signals across star systems. The cascade disruptor killed the transmitter and control circuits, but a capacitor is just a device that stores electricity. It might still have a charge. Chen's eyes widened. That capacitor could kill someone if it discharged incorrectly. It could also kill a fleet of Brett ships if it discharges correctly. They looked at each other for a moment. The idea was insane. It was cobbled together from desperate hope and theoretical physics. It had thousands of ways to go wrong, and maybe one way to go right. "I need to talk to the captain," Chen said. Captain Vaskis listened to their explanation in the dim red light of the bridge. while the surviving bridge crew floated at their useless stations, listening with expressions ranging from hope to horror. "Let me understand," Vaskis said when they finished. "You want to hook a doomsday weapon to a battery, point it at the Bretts, and hope it doesn't kill us all. That's a simple way to put it," Tanaka said. "But yes, what are our chances?" Tanaka hesitated. The original simulation showed a 97% chance of destruction for everything in the blast radius. That includes us. So, about a 3% chance of survival. Vaskis nodded slowly. She looked around the bridge. Her crew was watching her. They were cold, they were scared, they were slowly dying. But in their eyes, there was now something else. Something that hadn't been there an hour ago. Hope. Dangerous, desperate hope. "What do you need?" Vaskis asked. "People," Chen said. "As many as you can spare. We need to move the device to the outer door of the cargo bay. We need to dismantle the emergency beacon and extract the capacitor. We need to build a trigger mechanism that works without electricity. And we need to do all of this in the dark, in 0G, at temperatures that will keep dropping. Time," the Brett said, 3 days. "We need at least 2, maybe more." Vaskis stayed silent. Outside the viewport, she saw the Brett fleet. They had spread out around the Adamantine, forming a loose sphere, watching, waiting, enjoying the show. "There is one more thing," Vaskis said. "We need to aim this thing. Right now we're tumbling slightly. We need to point the cargo bay door right at the Brett formation. We can do that without engines," Chen thought. "Maybe. If we vent atmosphere from specific points on the hull, we can create thrust. Very small amounts, but in 0G, even small amounts matter. It will be like steering a boat by spitting off the sides. You can calculate the venting pattern. I can try. But Captain, every time we vent atmosphere, we lose air. Air we can't replace." Vaskis smiled grimly. "If this works, we won't need air. If it doesn't work, we won't need it either. Proceed. I'll organize work crews." She moved to the door, then stopped. "Dr. Tanaka-Chen, I want you to understand something. I'm not asking you to build a weapon. I'm asking you to create a chance. Right now, it's the only chance we have. So whatever you need, get it. Whatever rules you have to break, break them. I'll deal with the consequences." She left the bridge. Behind her, Tanaka and Chen looked at each other. "She's amazing," Tanaka said quietly. "She's terrified," Chen replied. "She just hides it better than the rest of us. Come on, we have work to do." The next few hours were organized chaos. Vaskis split the crew into teams, each with a specific task. One team began moving the gravity lens device from Cargo Bay 7 to a larger cargo bay that had the biggest outer door. Without gravity, the device floated freely, but it was massive. It took 20 people, using ropes and muscle power, to guide it through the corridors. Another team tackled the cargo bay door. The beacon was in the comms section, bolted to the hull. The cascade disruptor had killed its transmitter and control circuits, but the capacitor was a simpler device. Just 2 metal plates separated by insulating material holding an electrical charge. It might still work. Chen personally oversaw the extraction of the capacitor. It was delicate work. The capacitor held enough energy to power the beacon for days of continuous transmission. That same energy, released at once, could stop a human heart or cause a fire in an oxygen-rich environment. In 0G, a fire could spread in any direction. On a ship with limited air, that would be catastrophic. "Slowly," Chen said as his team worked. "Slowly. One wrong move and we all die ahead of schedule." The capacitor was extracted after 2 hours of careful work. It was the size of a small suitcase, heavier than it looked. Chen personally carried it to the cargo bay, treating it like a bomb, which, in a way, it was. Meanwhile, Tanaka worked on the theoretical problems. She had gathered a small team of scientists and engineers, the best technical minds on the ship. They huddled in the corner of the cargo bay, scratching equations onto paper with pencils. Pencils, because all electronic tablets were dead. Paper, because it was the only writing surface that still worked. "The lens creates a focused gravitational pulse," Tanaka explained, drawing diagrams by the light of a glow stick. "It compresses everything in its path. The compression is temporary but extreme. We're talking about forces that could turn solid metal into plasma and then compress that plasma into something denser than a neutron star." "What happens when it hits something?" an engineer asked. "Theoretically, a complete conversion of matter into energy. The target doesn't explode. It doesn't disintegrate. It simply ceases to be matter and becomes something else. a burst of radiation and exotic particles. And the ship that launches it? Tanaka hesitated. The lens is supposed to focus the effect in one direction, like a flashlight. But the original prototypes had an energy leak that went both forward and backward. In simulations, the firing ship, was always destroyed. Always. In 97% of cases, what distinguishes the 3%? In the 3% of simulations where the backward leak was minimal, the ship survived, damaged, but whole. What distinguished those 3%? Tanaka looked at her equations. Distance and angle. The further you are from your own blast, the better. And if you can create some kind of barrier between the lens and your ship. She stopped. Her eyes widened. What? Chen asked. The cargo bay door. If we set up the lens in the cargo bay and fire through the open door, the ship itself becomes a partial shield. The hull behind the lens will absorb some of the backscattered energy. Some is better than nothing. Tanaka began writing out new equations. Yes, this could work if we position the lens at the outer edge of the cargo bay. If we open the door immediately before firing, if the angle is exactly right, what are the chances then? Tanaka looked up. Her face was hard to read in the dim light. Maybe 10%, maybe 15%. Hard to say without proper calculations. And I can't do proper calculations without a computer. 15%. That's 5 times better than before. It's still small, but it's something. Keep working, Chen said. I'm going to figure out how to hook this thing up to the capacitor. Hours passed, and the temperature continued to drop. Frost began to form on metal surfaces. The crew worked in layers of clothing. Their fingers were numb from the cold. Some wrapped their hands in rags to keep working. Others took breaks, huddling together for warmth, before returning to their tasks. The medical team, led by Dr. Sarah Webb, had a different task. They were trying to keep everyone alive long enough to finish the work. Hypothermia is setting in, Webb reported to Vaskis during one of their brief meetings. The crew's core temperature is constantly dropping. We have maybe 30 hours before people start dying from the cold. What can you do? Not much. We're handing out heat packs from emergency kits. We're making people rotate through exercise sessions to generate body heat. And I've started putting some of the wounded into induced hypothermia. Vaskis blinked. How will lowering their body temperature help? It slows their metabolism. They use less oxygen, less energy. It's like putting them on pause. Webb's face was grim. We have 43 wounded after the attack. Some of them won't survive anyway. But by lowering their body temperature, we can extend their time. Give them a chance to see if we live or die. How many can you save? Maybe 30, maybe less. The others? Webb shook her head. The others are too far gone. Internal injuries, radiation exposure, trauma. Without proper medical facilities, they don't have long. Vaskis closed her eyes. 43 wounded, and she might lose over a dozen of them. Add to that the crew members killed in the initial attack, and her ship of 340 people had already dwindled to 302. By the time this was over, there would be even fewer. Do what you can, she said. Keep as many people alive as possible. And doctor, thank you for everything. Webb nodded and returned to her patients. Behind her, in the quiet corners of the medical bay, crew members sat with the dying, holding hands, talking to them, keeping them company. In their final hours. After the attack, there were 43 wounded. By the end of the second day, there were 31 left. 12 people had died in the dark, surrounded by comrades who couldn't save them. Vaskis made sure to know every name. Hours passed. The cold intensified. The ship's internal temperature dropped almost to freezing point. Ice crystals formed on the walls. The crew's breath came out in thick clouds. Some people stopped feeling the cold, which was actually a bad sign. It meant their bodies were shutting down, conserving heat for vital organs. The medical team had taught everyone the signs of severe hypothermia, confusion, slurred speech, loss of coordination. If anyone showed these signs, they were to report to the medical bay immediately. But some didn't report. They kept working, kept pushing, kept ignoring their body's warnings. They knew they were slowly dying. They also knew the work was more important than their comfort. Such was the human way. When the situation was impossible, they just worked harder. In Cargo Bay 3, Tanaka and her science team made a breakthrough. The lens has a focusing mechanism, she announced during a late-night conference. I didn't understand it at first because it's so different from human technology, but I think I can adjust it. Narrow the beam, make it more precise. What does that mean in practice? Vaskis asked. It means we can reduce the backblast. Not eliminate it, but reduce it. Energy that would have dispersed in all directions is focused forward toward the target. Good, keep working. Tanaka got to work. She spent hours digging into the device, adjusting components she barely understood, using tools that weren't intended for this work. It was like performing surgery with a hammer and chisel. Every adjustment was a guess. Every guess could be wrong, but she kept working. Meanwhile, Chen focused on the trigger mechanism. The simple switch he built would work, but it was rough. There was a chance it wouldn't make the right contact, a chance the charge wouldn't transfer fully, a chance that it would fail at the critical moment. He rebuilt it 3 times. Each version was a little better than the last. The final version used hand-polished contact points and springs a mechanism that would ensure a reliable contact. By normal standards, it was still rough, but by the standards of a dead ship with no power and no tools, it was a masterpiece. "How sure are you?" Vaskis asked, inspecting the trigger. 70% sure it will work as intended, maybe 80%, the other 20%. The charge might not transfer fully. The lens might activate at partial power, which could be worse than not activating at all. Or the capacitor could have degraded in storage, and the charge might not be enough to activate anything. And could the capacitor explode? Chen smiled grimly. That's actually the least likely problem. The capacitor is very stable. Yeah, it would take serious physical damage to make it discharge uncontrollably. Small blessings. As the countdown approached, something strange began to happen on the Adamantine. The crew, despite everything, began to unite in a way they never had before. In normal times, the ship was divided by rank and department. Officers stayed with officers. Engineers stayed with engineers. There were invisible walls between different groups, the kind that exist on every ship and in every organization. Now, those walls had disappeared. In the main corridor, a group of people from different departments worked together to reinforce a weak section of the hull. An officer and an enlisted soldier shared body heat under one blanket. A scientist helped a cook repair critical equipment. A pilot comforted a terrified technician. They were no longer crew members. They had become a family facing death together. Vaskis noticed this change during her rounds. She saw people helping each other without being asked. She saw kindness in the most unexpected places. She saw fear being replaced by resolve. "We'll make it," a young crew member told her. He was barely 20. He was assigned to the sensor observation team. His name was Rodriguez, and he was shaking so hard he could barely speak. "I believe in it. We'll make it." "What makes you so confident?" "Because we are human," Rodriguez said, "and humans don't give up. My grandmother used to say that. She survived a famine on Colony 4. When she was young, everyone thought they would die, but they didn't give up and they made it. She always said that's what makes us different. Other species accept their fate. Humans fight it." Vaskis patted him on the shoulder. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." "She was. She died last year, but I think she would be proud of us now." Vaskis moved on, but Rodriguez's words stayed with her. Humans don't give up. It was such a simple idea, such a basic truth. And yet, it was the only reason any of them were still alive. The third day began with death. Private First Class Maria Santos, 23, died of hypothermia in Section 347. She had been working on the cargo bay door mechanism. She didn't report her symptoms. She didn't ask for help. She just kept working until her body failed. She was found floating by the door, her hands still clutching a wrench, her eyes closed, as if she were sleeping. The cold had taken her so gently she didn't even realize it was happening. Vaskis held a short service. There was no time for anything else. They wrapped Santos in a sheet and placed her body in one of the empty cargo containers. When this is over, she will be returned to her family if this ends. 52 hours left, Vaskis announced after the service. "We are on schedule. The device is ready. The door is ready. The ship is aligned. Only the final preparations remain." She looked at her crew. They were exhausted, frozen, frightened. Many hadn't slept for days. Many were ill. Everyone knew they could die in the next few hours. But no one turned away. No one gave up. "I want everyone to spend the next few hours resting," Vaskis continued. "Write letters to your families. Pray if it helps. Make peace with what needs to be made peace with. At 18:00, we will begin final preparations. By 21:00, we will be ready to fire. The Brits will return in about 20 hours after that. We will not give them the pleasure of finding us dead." The crew dispersed. Some went to rest. Some went to write. Some went to say goodbye. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen conducted a final check of his work. Everything was in place. The gravity lens stood in its frame, aimed at the cargo bay door. The capacitor was connected. Its charge was waiting to be released. The trigger was ready. Its spring mechanism and contact points were polished. All that remained was someone who would press it. Chen sat down next to the device. The crystal in the center glowed softly, casting strange shadows on his face. He thought about his wife, who was on Colony 4. He thought about his children growing up without him. He thought about all the things he wanted to do with his life, but never would. Then he thought about the Bretts, about their arrogance, about their cruelty, about how they called humans pests and left them to freeze, and he smiled. Even if it didn't work, even if they all died, they would die fighting. They would die trying. They would die like humans, stubborn and dangerous, and absolutely refusing to accept their fate. That was worth something. Maybe it was worth everything. Tanaka floated over and sat next to him. Nervous, Chen? I am. You? She looked at the device. Beautiful, isn't it? In a terrible way. I was thinking the same thing. They sat there, watching the glow, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Outside the ship, the Brett fleet continued its patient vigil. They had no idea what was happening inside the Adamantine. They had no idea that the pests they were watching weren't giving up. They had no idea that in a few hours they would face something they had never seen before, a human weapon born from desperation, genius, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. The countdown continued. The clock ticked, and in the frozen gloom of a dead ship, humanity prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson. Never back a human into a corner. Never take away their hope. Never assume they will give up. Because when people have nothing to lose, they become something far more dangerous than any weapon. They become themselves. At the 60th hour, as if on a slow execution, Captain Elena Vaskis watched the Brett fleet through the covered viewport on the Adamantine's bridge. They hadn't moved in 2 days. They didn't need to move. They were patient predators, content to wait until their prey slowly died. But something was changing. The Brett ships were changing position. Destroyers were approaching. The flagship cruiser activated its engines. "They're coming," Park reported from his dead sensor station. He was tracking the enemy ships by eye, using a simple telescope mounted on the viewport, sooner than expected. How much sooner? 8 hours, maybe 7. Vaskis felt her stomach tighten. They weren't ready. The final preparations were supposed to take another 4 hours. If the Bretts arrive now, get Chen and Tanaka, she ordered. Emergency meeting, immediately. 5 minutes later, the team gathered on the bridge. Their breath formed clouds in the frosty air. "The Bretts are approaching earlier," Vaskis said. "We have to accelerate our schedule." "We can't," Chen protested. "Final calibrations aren't finished. The door mechanism needs one more test run. The venting pattern for alignment adjustments in the last moment isn't fly. Do it." Vaskis interrupted him. "We have 7 hours, maybe less. Everything that isn't ready by then has to be good enough." Chen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He nodded. "Understood, Captain." "What about the Bretts?" Torres asked. "Why are they coming closer sooner?" "Maybe they got bored," Park said. "Or maybe they want to record our deaths for propaganda. Or maybe they just decided to speed up the process." "It doesn't matter why," Vaskis said. "What matters is that they are approaching, and we need to be ready." She turned to her officers. "Everyone to their stations. Chen, go to the cargo bay and finish everything you can. Tanaka, I need those calibrations. In 3 hours. Park, keep tracking those ships. Torres, I want everyone on the ship ready to act on my command." The crew dispersed. Vaskis remained on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet get larger in the viewport. On the Brett flagship Gospodstvo Tseli, Dominion of the Goal, Commander Vithkarn was pleased with himself. The hunt had gone perfectly. The human ship was drifting helplessly. Its pathetic crew was slowly freezing to death. Soon he would have fresh trophies for the Hall of Conquered Pests. But waiting was boring. 3 solar cycles was too long. His crew was becoming impatient. Some junior officers were complaining about the delay. And more importantly, Vithkarn had received word from High Command that another fleet wanted to claim this victory for themselves. He couldn't allow that. These were his kills, his trophies, his glory. "Bring us closer," he ordered his navigator. "I want to see their faces when they realize we are here earlier. I want to record their desperation for the archives." "Yes, Commander. How close until visual range? I want them to see our ship with their own eyes. I want them to understand how small they are." Gospodstvo Tseli lunged forward. Its massive engines pushed it toward the helpless human ship. The escort ships followed, forming in perfect formation around the flagship. It was a display of power and absolute supremacy. Vithkarn smiled. Humans would see his ship and realize all their hopes were meaningless. They would spend their final hours in complete despair. That was the right way to treat pests on the Adamantine. The Brett's early arrival caused chaos. Teams that had been working methodically were now hurriedly performing their tasks. Mistakes were made, corrected, and made again. The careful schedule set by Vaskis collapsed. But humans are good at chaos. They adapt, they improvise, they make things work even when everything goes wrong. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen finished his last modifications to the trigger mechanism in record time. It wasn't perfect, but it would likely work, he hoped. Done, he announced over the intercom. The device is as ready as it can be. The door mechanism? Vaskis asked. One more test run. Give me 20 minutes. You have 10. Chen's team scrambled to the door controls. They had rebuilt the backup manual drive 3 times, replacing broken gears and stiff springs. The mechanism worked in theory. Now they had to prove it worked in practice. On my command, the team leader said. 3, 2, 1 turn. 6 people grabbed the manual handles and began to rotate them with all their might. The door groaned, metal screeched. Gears caught, slipped, caught again, and slowly, painfully, the cargo bay door began to open. Cold air rushed out. Pressure dropped. Everyone grabbed the railings as the ship suddenly had a new way of venting atmosphere. Keep going, Chen yelled. Fully open. I need to know it opens all the way. The door continued to open. Stars appeared in the widening opening. The cold of space hit them like a physical force, drawing the remaining heat from their bodies. Finally, the door locked in the fully open position. 38 seconds, someone reported. Faster than our best test run. Good. Chen inspected the mechanism. Everything looks secure. Close it. We don't want to lose more air than we have to. The handles were turned in the opposite direction. The door closed. The cargo bay sealed. Door mechanism confirmed as working, Chen reported to the bridge. We are ready. But Tanaka was not ready. In her makeshift work area near the gravity lens, she was still working on focusing settings. The math wasn't cooperating. Every time she thought she understood it, something else went wrong. I need more time, she muttered, scratching an equation onto a piece of metal with a bit of charcoal. The harmonics aren't right. The beam focus is off by 3%. 3% could mean the difference between survival and Tanaka. Chen floated over to her. We have no more time. The Bretts are within sight. Look, he pointed to the viewport. Through it, they already saw it. The Brett flagship cruiser, huge and terrible, was moving toward them like a mountain through space. Its running lights burned with cold blue fire. Its weapon ports shimmered. How close? Tanaka whispered. Close enough that we can see details. Close enough that they can see us. Close enough that if we don't fire soon, they will be too close to miss if the blast goes both ways. Tanaka looked at her equations, and they were unfinished. The settings weren't perfect. Everything was a little wrong, and in such a complex system, a little wrong could lead to disaster, but she had run out of time. The calculations are as good as they can be, she said. Focus is optimized for current conditions. If the Bretts approach, the geometry will change and I'll have to redo everything. Then fire now. We fire now. Tanaka took a deep breath. Or we die without trying. And I didn't spend 2 days doing math in the dark to die without trying. On the bridge, Vaskis received the news. The device was ready. The door was ready. The ship was aligned. Only the trigger remained. Torres. Ship-wide announcement. Channel is open, Captain. Vaskis took a moment to collect her thoughts. Outside the viewport, the Brett flagship continued to approach. It was so close now that she could distinguish individual hull plates. So close that she saw the weapon arrays that had crippled her ship. All stations, she said. This is the captain. The moment we have striven for has arrived. In about 15 minutes, we will attempt to fire the gravity lens. You all know what that means. You all know the risks. I will not insult you by pretending this will be easy or safe. She paused, looking at her bridge crew. Park at sensors, Torres at comms, the rest at their posts. Everyone was looking at her. I want you to know something. These last 3 days have been the worst of my life and the best at the same time. I've seen this crew do impossible things. I've seen you work without sleep, without heat, without hope. I've seen you refuse to give up, even when giving up would be easier. Her voice wavered slightly. She made it sound firm. Whatever happens next, I am proud of every one of you. If we die today, we die like humans, stubborn, dangerous, and completely unwilling to accept our fate. And if we survive, she smiled grimly. If we survive, we will make the Bretts regret the day they decided to call us pests. She stood tall. All stations, take battle positions. Cargo bay team, prepare the door mechanism. Tanaka Chen, get to the trigger. On my command, we will show these aliens what humanity is made of. She closed the channel and looked at Torres. Give me the Bretts, audio and video. I want him to see what's coming. The screen flickered, turned on. The face of Commander Vithkarn appeared. His scars were twisted with mockery. To the human captain, he said, I see you are still alive. How disappointing. I was hoping to find frozen corpses by now. Sorry to disappoint you, Vaskis replied. I wanted to give you a message before the end. A message? How charming. What can pests say to their superiors? Vaskis smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been backed into a corner and finally fought back. You made a mistake, she said. When you disabled our ship, you thought you were teaching us a lesson. You thought we would drift here and die, proving that humans are weak. But you forgot something. And what is that? You forgot what happens when you back a human into a corner. You forgot that we have been fighting impossible odds since we learned to stand upright. You forgot that we are a species that split atoms, walked on moons, and spread through the stars, despite everything that tried to stop us. Vithkarn laughed. Beautiful words, but words don't change anything. You are still helpless. Your ship is still dead, and in a few hours you will all be frozen meat. No, Vaskis said. We won't. She turned to Torres. Cut the transmission. The screen went black. He will be confused, Park noted. Good. Let him be confused. It's the last thing he will feel. Vaskis took a deep breath. Cargo bay team, prepare for door operation. Trigger team, stand by, on my command. 3, 2, 1, mark. In Cargo Bay 3, everything happened simultaneously. The 6-person team grabbed the manual handles and began to turn them with all their might. The cargo bay door groaned. Opening, releasing the remaining atmosphere of the bay into space. Stars appeared in the widening opening. Chen grabbed the trigger pole, leaning against the nearest railing. The trigger was simple. Push the pole, close the circuit, release the charge. Easy. His hands were shaking. Tanaka floated next to him, watching the opening door. Wait for full extension, she said. The beam needs a clear path. The door continued to open. 20%, 30%, 50%. Outside, the Brett flagship cruiser filled the viewport. It was so close now that Chen could see alien crew members moving behind their own viewports. They were pointing at the Adamantine, probably laughing at the pathetic humans who opened their cargo bay for no apparent reason. They had no idea what was coming. 70%, 80%. I'm almost there. Tanaka breathed. Almost. The door locked in the fully open position. 38 seconds. Just like in the test run. The cargo bay was now open to space, and the gravity lens aimed directly at the Brett formation. Clear path confirmed. Someone shouted from the door team. Fire at will. Chen looked at Tanaka. She looked at him. Do it, she said. Chen pushed the pole. The metal contact touched the capacitor terminal. The circuit closed. Months of stored electrical energy poured through the connection in an instant, spilling into the gravity lens like water into a dry river. The crystal in the center of the lens shone blindingly, not with the soft light it had shown before, but with a bright, terrible glow that turned the entire cargo bay white. The cosmos screamed. In the vacuum, there was no sound, but everyone on the Adamantine heard it anyway. A sound that bypassed the ears and went straight to the brain. The sound of reality ripping and reassembling. Wrong. The beam shot from the gravity lens like the finger of an angry god. It wasn't light, not really. It was something worse, something that warped and distorted everything it touched. It hit the Brett flagship cruiser. For one frozen moment, nothing happened. Gospodstvo Celi hung in space. Its hull shone, its weapons ready. Its crew didn't realize that the universe had just changed. Then it collapsed, not exploded, but collapsed. The huge ship crumpled like paper in the fist of a giant. Hundreds of meters of advanced alien technology compressed to a space smaller than a human head, then smaller still, then smaller than an atom, and then it disappeared, not destroyed, not damaged, just gone, converted from matter into something else. A burst of exotic particles spread in all directions, but the beam didn't stop. It passed beyond the point where the flagship cruiser had been. It passed through the escort ships, which collapsed and disappeared just as quickly. It passed through the debris from the initial battle. It passed through empty space, and it hit the moon of a nearby gas giant. Vaskis saw it happen from the bridge. The beam struck the moon's surface and kept going, plunging deep into the rock and ice. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the moon began to glow. The gravitational forces released by the lens didn't just destroy the surface, they compressed the core. They compressed the moon's atoms themselves until thermonuclear fusion began. Uncontrolled, violent thermonuclear fusion. The moon became a sun for 1 second, and then it exploded. The shockwave spread at a significant fraction of the speed of light. It first reached the remaining Brett ships, auxiliary vessels that were too far from the initial beam to be destroyed directly. They had no chance. A wall of energy and debris swept through them like a brush through dust. Then there was the asteroid belt. Millions of tons of rock and ice evaporated or scattered, or were simply pushed away by the force of the blast. And then the shockwave reached the Adamantine. The last thing Chen saw was a wall of light approaching them. He had just enough time to throw himself behind the gravity lens, hoping its frame would provide some protection. Then everything went white. On the bridge, Vaskis grabbed the chair as the ship jerked and spun. Sirens that had been silent for 3 days suddenly sprang to life, screaming warnings of hull, stress, thermal damage, and a dozen other things. The viewports became opaque as protective shutters closed. The temperature jumped sharply as radiation penetrated the hull. People screamed, and then, just as quickly as it started, it ended. The Adamantine tumbled through space, battered and scorched, but somehow, unimaginably, still whole. The shockwave had passed. The worst of the energy had been deflected by the ship's position and the hull's partial shielding. They were alive. "Damage report," Vaskis rasped. Her voice was hoarse, her throat dry. "Someone, give me a damage report." "Working on it," Park said. He had a gash on his forehead, but his hands were already moving across his console. "Captain, I'm getting readings. The sensors are working. Some of them, at least." "What do you see?" Park paused for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was full of wonder. "Nothing. I see nothing. The Brett fleet is gone. The entire flagship cruiser, the destroyers, the auxiliary ships, everything is gone. And the moon, Captain, the moon that was there before? It's not there. It's an expanding cloud of debris. We hit the moon. We destroyed it." Vaskis closed her eyes. They did it. They really did it. A weapon that shouldn't exist, built by desperate people without power and hope, had just vaporized an enemy fleet and a celestial body. "Cargo bay team," she asked. "Chen? Tanaka?" There was a long silence. Then, rasping over the intercom, a familiar voice. "This is Chen. We're alive down here. Tanaka is injured but breathing. The lens. I think it's destroyed, burnt out from the energy that passed through it. The frame we built is warped and melted, but we survived." Vaskis felt tears appear in her eyes. In the cold, they froze almost instantly, but she didn't care. "Chen," she said, "you're magnificent. You did it." "We did it," Chen corrected. "All of us, every person on this ship, we did it together." Outside in the void, where the Brett fleet had been, there was only dust and radiation, and the scattered remains of a moon that no longer existed. The Dominion's most formidable weapon had been reduced to nothing by a crippled human ship. The Bretts called humans pests. They treated them as nothing, as something not worth attention, as prey. They were very, very wrong. The hours after the fire were a blur of activity and exhaustion. The Adamantine was alive, but barely, and the shockwave from the moon's destruction had damaged already weakened systems. New breaches opened in 3 sections. The rotation from the explosion left the ship tumbling in space, but they were alive. Vaskis organized the survivors into repair crews. Without power, repairs were at best rough. They used metal patches and chemical sealants to close the breaches. They used ropes and muscle to stop the rotation, venting what little atmosphere they could afford in precise bursts until the ship stabilized. In the medical bay, Dr. Webb worked with double the energy. The blast had caused new injuries, burns and fractures, and radiation poisoning, but it also gave her something she didn't have before: hope. "We have about 18 hours of air left," she reported to Vaskis. "That's if we're lucky. If we're not lucky, less." "The convoy is gone," Vaskis said. "They will send help." "How do you know?" "Because that's what humans do. They don't abandon each other, not if they can help it." Webb nodded slowly. She wanted to believe. Everyone wanted to believe. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen looked at the damage. The gravity lens was destroyed. Its crystal core was charred and cracked from the energy that had passed through it. The frame they had built was warped and melted, but they had survived. Tanaka lay on a makeshift stretcher. Her left arm was broken and her face scorched from the radiation flash. But she was smiling. "It worked," she whispered. "The math was correct. The focus settings. They worked." "We saved ourselves," Chen said. "We saved ourselves." Tanaka closed her eyes. "All of us together. That's how humans work. When one person can't do something alone, they find others to help. When something is impossible, they do it anyway." She laughed weakly, then winced in pain. The Bretts never understood that. They thought, "We're weak because we need each other." They didn't understand that needing each other is what makes us strong. Chen sat next to her. His own body ached from a dozen minor injuries. His lungs burned from breathing recycled air that was becoming increasingly stale. But he was alive, against all odds, against all logic, against everything the universe had thrown at them. He was alive. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Wait. Hope we survive. And," she coughed, "and remember what we did here. Remember that humans never give up." Waiting was the hardest part. With the immediate crisis over, the crew had nothing to do but save air and hope. Some people slept, others talked quietly, saving their breath. A few played cards by the light of glow sticks, treating the situation like any other difficult mission. Vaskis made her rounds, as she had done every day since the attack. But now her words were different. "You survived," she told every person she visited. "You did the impossible. Whatever happens next, no one can take that away." The ship continued to drift, the air continued to thin, the cold continued to seep in. They had won their battle, but they could still lose the war against physics and time. And then, 16 hours after the fire, something appeared on the horizon. Captain. Park's voice was hoarse from cold and fatigue, but there was no doubt about the excitement. "Contact. Multiple contacts at heading 270. They're approaching fast." Vaskis hurried to the bridge as fast as she could. "Identification? Working on it. Sensors are barely working, but..." Park squinted at his display. "Human signatures." Captain Torres was already at her post, trying to revive the damaged comm system. "I'm receiving a signal, weak but readable. It's the convoy. They reached Colony 7 and sent back a rescue fleet. How many ships? 6? No, 8. And Captain. One of them is Defiant, a battleship." Vaskis felt her legs buckle. She grabbed the nearest railing to keep from floating away. "Get them through. Whatever you do, get them through." The communication screen flickered, dying, then flickering again. Then a face appeared. A man with a stern face in the uniform of a Commodore. His expression was a mixture of relief and concern. "UEF Adamantine. This is Commodore Harrison of the Defiant. We received the report from your convoy about the attack. Are you still functioning? Are there any survivors?" Vaskis stood tall. Her uniform was torn and stained. Her face was haggard from hunger and cold. Her eyes were red from fatigue and dried tears, but her voice was steady. "Commodore, this is Captain Elena Vaskis of the Adamantine. We are functioning. We have about 200 survivors. We are low on air, and we need immediate medical assistance. 200 survivors out of a crew of 340. Harrison's face softened a little. "We are already on the way, Captain. It's a 3-hour journey. Can you hold out that long?" "We will hold out as long as it takes, Commodore. We've had practice." "Understood, Captain." Harrison hesitated. "We passed through the sector where the Brett fleet was reported to be. We found only debris and radiation. What happened here?" Vaskis looked at her bridge crew. Park, Torres, the others who had worked, fought, and refused to die. She thought of Chen and Tanaka in the cargo bay. She thought of Dr. Webb and her patients. She thought of the 12 people who had died in the cold gloom, and the soldiers who had died in the first attack. "We survived. That's what happened," she said. "The Bretts tried to kill us, and we survived. Captain, our sensors are showing readings that don't make sense. There are energy signatures we've never seen before. There are debris fields that seem to belong to a planetary body. The physics of what happened here is classified," Vaskis said firmly, "at least until I speak with Fleet Command. For now, let's just say the Bretts underestimated us. They won't make that mistake again." Harrison looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Understood, Captain. Help is on the way." Defiant out. The screen went black. Park let out a long sigh. "We made it. We really made it." "Not yet," Vaskis said. "We will have made it when everyone is off this ship and in a proper medical facility. Until then, we are still fighting." but she was smiling when she said it. The next 4 hours passed like 4 years. The air grew thinner. The temperature dropped. People began to fade. Their bodies were giving up now that help was close. Webb moved through the ship with her meager supplies, keeping people alive with willpower. She administered the last stimulants, the last oxygen supplements, the last of everything. And when she ran out of medicine, she used words, "Hold on, help is coming. A little more, you will make it." Some didn't make it. 3 more died in the last hours. Their bodies simply gave up after days of cold, stress, and hope. Vaskis remembered their names, as she had remembered all the others, but most survived, most held on. And when the Defiant finally pulled alongside the Adamantine in speed, and when the first rescue shuttles began to dock with the battered cruiser, Vaskis allowed herself to feel relief for the first time in 3 days. The evacuation was efficient and professional. Medical teams flooded the ship, triaging patients and hurriedly delivering the most severe cases to the Defiant's infirmary. Engineers assessed the damage, shaking their heads at what they saw. A ship that should have been a coffin had somehow held together. Vaskis was one of the last to leave. She walked through the empty corridors one last time, running her hand along the cold metal walls. The Adamantine had been her home for 5 years. It had carried her "Yeah, thank you," she whispered to the ship. "I know you can't hear me, but thank you." Then she turned and walked to the docking port where the last shuttle waited. The debriefing took 3 days. Vaskis told the story from beginning to end. The ambush, the cascade disruptor, the discovery of the gravity lens, the desperate plan, the shot, the moon. Fleet Command listened in silence. When she finished, there were no questions for a time. Then, Admiral Chen, head of the investigative committee, leaned forward. "Captain, do you understand what you are describing? A weapon that can destroy a planet, that can compress matter into singularities, that can turn moons into temporary suns." "I understand, Admiral. And you built this weapon from spare parts and a capacitor in the dark on a ship without power?" "My crew built it, sir. I just gave them permission." The Admiral leaned back. His expression was unreadable. The gravity lens was being transported for destruction. It was deemed too dangerous to exist, and now you have proven that assessment was correct. One device, hurriedly assembled, destroyed 15 warships and a moon. "Yes, sir. The political consequences alone are staggering. If the Bretts find out what happened, if other powers find out, with respect, Admiral, the Bretts already know, or will know when their fleet doesn't return. As for the other powers, Vaskis met hizgaze. Perhaps it is time for them to learn what humans are capable of when we have no other choice." The committee deliberated quietly. Finally, Admiral Chen nodded. "Captain Vaskis, the official report will state that the Brett fleet was destroyed by an experimental weapon that malfunctioned during the attack, destroying both the enemy and itself. The details are classified at the highest level. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." "Good." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "Unofficially, Captain, what you and your crew did was impossible. You all should have been dead. That you are alive is a testament to human ingenuity and courage, which I have rarely seen in my 50 years of service." "Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me, Vaskis. The Brett Dominion will want answers. They will want revenge. And when they come for it, they will find us ready," Vaskis said. As always. 3 months later, the Brett Dominion sent an ambassador to human space, and this was the first diplomatic contact in decades. The ambassador arrived alone on a small shuttle, broadcasting signals of peace the whole way. The meeting took place at Outpost Sigma 12, a neutral station on the edge of human territory. Vaskis was invited to attend, though she was ordered to stay silent unless directly asked. The Brett ambassador was old. His gray skin was covered in scars from countless years of service to the Dominion. His name was Vithkorat, and he had been a fleet commander before humans were a spacefaring civilization. "We have analyzed the debris," he said without preamble. "We have studied the energy signatures. We know what you did. The human delegation remained silent. The gravity lens. We did not think your species possessed such technology. We were wrong." Vithkorat's black eyes swept the room, stopping on Vaskis. You were the captain of that ship." Vaskis nodded. "I was. You were dying. Your ship was dead. You had no weapons, no power, no hope, and yet you found a way to destroy an entire fleet and a moon." The ambassador's voice was level, but in his eyes was something that could have been respect or fear, or both. "We found a way to survive," Vaskis said. "That's what humans do." "Yes, we understand that now." Veeth Karat turned back to the human diplomats. The Dominion has decided to reconsider its position regarding humanity. We will retreat from the contested sectors. We recognize your territorial claims. We will coexist. And if we refuse? Asked one of the diplomats. Veeth Karat's eyes returned to Vaskis. Then other ships will arrive, and perhaps you will destroy them. Or perhaps you will destroy more moons, more planets, more stars. Perhaps you will burn the entire galaxy before you accept defeat. He shook his head slowly. We are an ancient species. We have conquered thousands of worlds. We have crushed countless civilizations. But we have never seen anything like what happened in that system. He stood up. The meeting was over. You are not pests, he said as he left. We were fools to think you were. You are something much more dangerous. You are creative, you are stubborn, and you have absolutely no understanding of when you should surrender. The door closed behind him. In the ensuing silence, one of the diplomats turned to Vaskis. Captain, what exactly does he mean by creative? Vaskis thought of the cargo bay, the gravity lens, the capacitor, the trigger made of a pole and a few metal contacts. The crew working in the dark, in the cold, refusing to die. He means, she said slowly, that when you tell a human that something is impossible, we take it as a challenge. And when you take away all our options, we create new ones. And when you try to kill us, she smiled, we find a way to kill you first, even if we have to rewrite the laws of physics to do it. The schematics of the gravity lens were recovered from the Adamantine's logs. They were studied, analyzed, and then locked away in the deepest vaults of the human command fleet. Attached to the file was a single note, Project Prometheus status, archived. Do not deploy except in the case of an existential threat to humanity. Remember what we learned. This weapon doesn't just destroy our enemies, it destroys everything nearby. Therefore, use it only when there is truly no other choice. Below the official memo, someone had added a handwritten comment. And remember what the Bretts learned. Never back a human into a corner. We are most dangerous when we have nothing to lose. The Adamantine was eventually repaired. It took 8 months and cost more than building a new ship, but Vaskis insisted, and Fleet Command agreed. The ship had earned the right to fly again. When the repairs were completed, Vaskis stood in the restored cargo bay where the gravity lens had once been. Now, the space was empty, just metal walls and deck plating, but she could still feel the echoes of what had happened there. Chen and Tanaka stood next to her. Strange, Tanaka said, being here alive again. Right, Chen replied. This is where we fought. This is where we won. This is where we proved that humans are not pests. Vaskis nodded slowly. The Bretts would never forget what happened here, just as no one else who heard this story would. A dead ship, a dying crew, a weapon that shouldn't exist. And somehow, against all odds, victory. This is a human story, she turned to them. This is what we do. We face impossible odds and find a way out, not because we are stronger, smarter, or better equipped, but because we refuse to give up, because we would rather die trying than live by surrendering, because when we are told we can't do something, we prove otherwise. Outside the cargo bay, the stars shone in the eternal darkness. Somewhere out there, the Bretts were recovering, other species were watching. The galaxy was huge and dangerous, full of things that wanted humanity dead. But humanity was ready. Humanity had always been ready, because humans were creative. Humans were stubborn. Humans were absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. And when the next impossible threat arrived, when the next enemy decided that humans were prey, when the next crisis seemed too big to survive, humanity would do what it had always done. It would find a way. It would build something impossible. It would refuse to die. And the galaxy would again learn why one should never underestimate a human who has nothing to lose.